Joe has more combat experience than anyone in this room. And he has more combat time in Vietnam than anyone in this room. I can say that without checking with you guys. If you had 3 tours, he still had you beat. And he covered a lot of other wars too. I don't know if you know that, but it wasn't just the Vietnam War. Joe holds the only Bronze Star with V for Valor awarded to a civilian during the Vietnam War. I don't have one of those. A lot of us don't. That says something. That was awarded to Joe for actions during the Ia Drang actions, which are portrayed in his great book and in the movie. I was in Vietnam fairly early in the war, 1965, when I got there. Joe was there before I was. He was there with the very first combat troops that came in, and they were the Marines. But when Nate Pulliam and the 1st Cav Division moved in down the road from us at Anakay, Joe came poking around Pleiku looking for stories, I guess about the 1st Cav. And that's where I met him. I met him at Camp Oualline. At that time, there was not a whole lot of Army aviation in country. And consequently, we at Pleiku flew reporters all the time. We hardly saw them on my second tour, as most of you guys know. But then, in 1965, 66, they were everywhere, at least in the rear areas. But Joe was different. We didn't like the rest of them very much, I'll just tell you that. Most of them treated us like servants, expected us to do their bidding. Joe flew to the battles. They were mostly sitting around in the rear areas and the bars. We did some of that too, but only between battles. Joe went to where the gunfire was. We liked him. When he was up around Pleiku, we invited him to stay in our hooches, and sometimes he did. If there was an empty bunk, Joe would thankfully accept it. He drank our whiskey, played cards with us. We had a lot of good times together. If there was not an empty bunk, he'd roll out on my concrete floor and be thankful to do it. I didn't see any other reporters do that. Well, that's not true. Charlie Black would. Not with me, but he would do that. My buddy Ray Burns flew Joe into the Special Forces Camp Battle, if you guys didn't know that. Joe asked him to do it. He wanted to go in there. There wasn't any other reporter there. They came in by the dozens after the shooting all stopped. I was in there a couple of times during the battle. I didn't enjoy it. Joe was there the whole time. That's the kind of guy he was. You've all seen in the movie how he hitched a ride with Ancient Serpent 6 to get into that battle. Probably didn't know what he was getting into, but he was looking for a story and he got it. That's a pretty true depiction from what I know about it. Of all the reporters I met in Vietnam, and I met a lot of them, there are only 3 that I care for. And I'm sorry, I know we got some press present. I'm not talking about you. You weren't there. I'm not trying to insult you. But the only 3 we pilots liked were Joe Black, Whit Fowler, and Joe Galloway. The other 2 are in the next world now, but we're very fortunate to have him with us tonight, Joe, that is. I don't always agree with what Joe writes for the newspaper these days, but that's irrelevant. That doesn't make any difference. You, Joe, are truly a soldier's friend. We thank you very much for agreeing to speak to our little group tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Joe Galloway.
Chuck, for that extravagant welcome. And some of it may even be true, folks. You know, Chuck, you can parse that part of it.
Not the part about the money, though.
Yeah, he owes me money, I'm sure. He lost that game. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you this evening. More than I can say. You know, I told this to somebody earlier this evening. Anywhere in the world where I have been being a very, very bad boy, I mean, crossing 2 or 3 lines, the only thing I've ever been mistaken for is an Army aviator. True. So I love you guys. You know, and my perspective of Vietnam was kind of the infantryman's, because I suppose I could have covered that war from any one of a number of angles, but I chose the infantry. It's my choice, and I chose the infantry. Now, some folks might think that's strange or even a bit perverse, but, you know, with the infantry, things happen close enough that I could see it, and usually slow enough that I could even understand it. And there are really no great drawbacks to that, except that in the course of 4 tours in Vietnam and several other wars, I've personally been bombed, rocketed, strafed, and napalmed by the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Navy, the U.S. Marines, and U.S. Army Aviation. Here I am. Still here. First of all, I'm thankful that that generation of folks who were hitting the pickles, which couldn't shoot worth a shit. And second of all, I'm sure glad they didn't have any of those GPS guided bombs. You know, I was in Washington, D.C. recently, and there were a couple of stories that might not have trickled out to where you folks live, so I'll tell you about them. There one evening was a tall, silver-haired gentleman wearing about a $6,000 Italian suit walking down Capitol Hill area. And a fellow jumped out of the alley and stuck a pistol in his ribs and says, "Give me your money." The guy gets all indignant. He says, "You can't do this to me. I'm a congressman." And the guy with the pistol says, "Okay, in that case, give me my money." Now the other story is the Supreme Court. 9-0 unanimous decision. You know, it's been years since we had one of those. And what it was they ruled that Washington, D.C. could not have a nativity scene this Christmas, or any other Christmas for that matter. And not a matter of separation of church and state. It is that they couldn't find 3 wise men or a virgin in that town. But they did find enough asses to fill every stable in the country. Now, you know, the first time I ever had to talk to a bunch of helicopter pilots, I asked a buddy of mine, I said, hey, what do I do? He said, "Look, here's the way it is with the helicopter guys. You know this instinctively. Half of them will be so drunk they can't understand a word you're saying, and the other half are so deaf they can't hear you. Just talk to the ladies." And it stood me in pretty good stead. And I want to say that I heard some nice things said about cavalry ladies. I want to tell you that all of you guys married so far above yourselves that you know you ought to get a nosebleed looking up at them women. Here, here. You better. I just want to tell you, the last time I talked to the helicopter guys, it was a National Guard Chinook battalion in Denver, the Colorado unit. And they were having their dining in or out, whichever it was. All I know is that they started tailgating in the parking lot at 4 p.m. The official tailgating started at 5. The cocktail reception inside started at 6. And dinner started promptly at 7 with this punch bowl ceremony, about 20 gallons of raw hooch. And then I think they put a shovel of horse shit in it, trying to give it a little flavor. And then started sentencing people to drink canteen cups full of this. I did not get called up to speak until 11 o'clock at night. And I want to tell you, there were 50% casualties by then. They were in the floor. But it was a good evening. I was drunk too. So if I didn't make sense, they couldn't understand anything. I guess I got to get serious here at some point. I want to tell you that right up front that my mentor and my best friend, General Hal Moore, told me one time, Joe, the preacher saves no souls after the first 15 minutes. So try to hold your talks to about that, and they will love you. So that's what I'm going to do tonight. I'm going to try to hang in there. I want to thank all of you for your service to our country. I want to thank you for your service in a war that wasn't popular. I want to thank you for giving it all that you had. I want to thank you. You know, ours may not have been officially the greatest generation, but you guys were the greatest of our generation. When you were called, you went. So did 3 million other good young Americans. They're my heroes. You're my heroes. You know, in the Oualline, in the 1st and the 7th Cavalry, 65 to 70% were draftees. Some of them, most of them were near the end of their 2-year service when they went into that battle. We had men who left there rolled up in their ponchos dead who had less than 2 weeks left in the Army and should have been on a freedom bird going home. No man slacked. No man said, this ain't fair. Leave me back in the rear. There were guys who had been wounded a few days before or injured who got up when they heard it was going on and got up in the hospital and just put their clothes on and left and went back and got back in the battle and got shot again. Now, that's the greatest to me. That sense of what's right, that thing in the Bible, that verse that says everything about you, my friends, and every man who served in that place. Greater love hath no man than he lay down his life for the sake of another. And that's, there it is. There was always, I think, an unwritten contract between the grunts and the chopper guys. And it may be said best in a letter William Tecumseh Sherman wrote to his friend Ulysses S. Grant at the end of the Civil War. And he said this: "I knew wherever I was that you thought of me, and if in trouble, you would come for me if alive." There it is. There it is. We knew if we were in trouble, you'd come for us. The guns overhead keeping us warm. The slicks bringing us ammo, taking wounded out, taking the dead out. And eventually, you know, old Ancient Serpent 6, old snake shit, Bruce Crandall. Man, that guy flew me into some bad places. But eventually, he would come back and get me. And that's the important thing, too. So thank you for all you did. I'm glad you made it home. I'm glad you're still here. You know, every once in a while someone will say, well, you know, you've written a book and they made a movie, doesn't that, you know, close the loop? What's that psychobabble for that? Closure. Haven't you achieved closure? No. We're not meant to have that. The things that we witnessed, the things that happened to us, the things we did, we're meant to remember them, because that includes those who fell around us, those who died in our arms. You know, looking into the face of a boy and watching the life run out of his eyes, and lying to him, telling him he's going to be all right. This is hard. You know, and again I say, look, back when those things were happening, we were young too. We didn't really know all there is good and bad about life. But, you know, most of us didn't have a wife or kids at that point. We didn't know all of those things. Now we do. Now we have had all of that. We have known the good and the bad of life. And now we know what they will never know. So we're obliged to remember. We're obliged to carry that for them, for those on your wall over there. We really are. And I don't, you know, it's not that much of a burden. I can carry them all. They don't weigh that much. Just here. Thank you. Thank you for your service on behalf of a country which doesn't really know the cost of war or who pays the price. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, God bless you. God bless our country. God bless the hundreds of thousands of American soldiers, Marines, airmen, sailors who are on duty tonight, some of them in deadly, dangerous places, doing for us now what you did in your time, standing tall, being heroes. Thank you. God bless you.